All right, welcome back to the Good Fruit Show, where we are on a mission to discover a deep sense of meaning and purpose in our lives. We have the strong man Elliott Hulse back with us today for part two of his life story. On the last episode, we discussed a lot, including Elliott's story of steroids when he was a newborn and how that was his secret to becoming super jacked, growing up with masculine men such as his father and his uncle, how he met Colleen, his high school sweetheart, his knack and passion for football, how he wrote the word kill on his football helmet and was rivaled in his local community for being a notorious tackler, where he was during 9/11 as well as the country's response to this tragedy, his deep formation into a sense of spirituality, and so much more. It was a really, really good episode. So if you haven't gone and checked that one out, I highly recommend you do so. And Elliot, welcome back to the show, man.
Thanks, CJ. Having a good time.
Cool. So last time we left off, we were talking about you were working as a trainer, and we were talking about some of your coworkers and some of the notable impacts that they had on your life. But I think we were around the age of like 25, 26. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to explore some more with that age and kind of see where you're at uh, during that time of your life.
Okay. Yeah. 25, 26. I was living in Florida. I was probably just getting my business started. I was working as a independent contractor, personal trainer at a gym in downtown St. Petersburg, Florida. And was getting a couple clients here and there, enough to just pay the bills on the townhouse that we bought, which was a terrible idea because we bought at like 2006, right before the housing crash of '08, and no one could have warned me because I wouldn't have listened because I wanted it so bad. And anyway, the bottom line is I was breaking my face to pay on this overpriced townhouse in South St. Petersburg, Florida. Driving around St. Pete in my busted up old van that my dad gave me, and also just starting to learn about internet marketing, like particularly content. What it was called? It was called info products and info publishing around this time.
And, just previously you'd been kind of getting into spirituality, holistic living, and you applied those principles to raising a family. And so, you kind of had the counterintuitive approach to those areas, and now you're kind of taking this very counterintuitive approach, especially back then with the info products. So, how did that exploration look? Like, how did you get into it? Was there any like people that you learn from that stick out to you?
Yeah, so when I started as a personal trainer in St. Pete, I worked for a commercial gym first, and I was also studying marketing because I wanted to get a lot of clients. But I quickly realized that um, I wasn't going to make the income that I wanted. So I took the marketing skills that I was learning for getting more clients in the gym and I turned it online. And so I learned how to like use SEO. And back then, like, you just make a website with the title or the keywords that you want in it, and like the next day it just shows up on Google. It's like, oh, here it is. And so like in like 3 days I ranked as like number one for personal trainer St. Petersburg. So once I figured that out, I was like, well, I don't need to go to the gym. I don't need the gym anymore because I can get all my own clients. So I just turned that on. At the time, I learned, or shortly I learned from Matt Basak, who was my internet marketing mentor at the time. I paid, I don't know, like $5,000 to do a workshop with him where he introduced this brand new concept and brand new technology at the time, and he coined the phrase squeeze page. He's like, what you got to do is you got to get people's emails. And so he actually created his own autoresponder. This was this was all brand new. This was like cutting edge technology. Somebody puts their email in, and then automatic emails start sending to them, and you could sell to them through those emails. So I set that up, and that's why I dominated, not only with SEO, which didn't take anything, but then I started getting lots of clients to join me outside of the commercial gym. So I started renting space at another gym, just kind of like a meathead gym in St. Petersburg. But the lady who owned the gym was like, where are you getting these clients? Because people would just come in, just show up, hey, I'm here for Elliot. And she's never seen this before, because she's like, usually the trainers that are here, they either get clients that are already here, or they brought their clients with them. But I came with almost no clients, but people are showing up every other day. And it's not like people that knew me. I was like, hello, hi, I'm Elliot. And she's like, where the hell are these people coming from? So she was dumbfounded. But anyway, so I'm bringing her business because I'm getting business, and it was all because I started with creating squeeze pages, and he also showed me how to create a sales page. And so a sales page was just a long page where you wrote copy. So I learned how to write sales copy, and you would take people through a sequence that would ultimately lead to an offer. And so it was hard to sell training like that. So I didn't really sell training like that from my squeeze page. The next thing was call me and then book an appointment to come and see me. But I had also read a book at the time called Multiple Streams of Income by Gary Allen, I think was the name of the author. And this book was just it was cutting edge at the time, but he was like, there's all these different brand new ways that you can make money, passive income from the internet. So I was like, okay. So I listened to that CD. It was a CD set. And he spoke about ebooks. He's like, you write a book just like anybody else would write a book, but you don't need a publisher. You can write a book and you could sell it for whatever you want, because unlike publishing books where you got to go based on the publishing and what books normally cost, normal books, tangible books, cost maybe $12. He introduced me to the concept of you could sell an ebook for $100 and people will pay for it. Because I think at the time it was novel, right? It was novelty. And if you're solving a problem and you position yourself as an expert, people will pay $100 for literally a PDF that you wrote. So I went to town on creating a PDF. So I'm training people at the gym, but I'm also writing this ebook called Unleash Your Primal Edge, that contains all of the holistic health and corrective exercise and functional exercise and medicine stuff that I was learning from Paul Chek and Dr. Mercola and Dr. Kalish, and so I was doing a lot of studying, and then I would take all that what I was learning and applying to my clients, and I made a PDF. I wrote a sales letter, and I started trying to sell that. That was my first online product. This is, you asked, I'm probably about 25, 26. So this must be 2006, maybe 2006, 2007. And I did okay. I sold a couple of them, but the gym started really picking up around that time also, because my website, well, no, I didn't even get to that yet. Sorry. Yeah, I was trying to sell that while I was still working in somebody else's gym. But as my clientele grew, I wanted to leave that gym too. I wanted to leave her gym, and I didn't want to pay, because she had me paying a lot of money for rent. I didn't want to pay her rent anymore. So around that time, I discovered this other guy online who was training people in the parks and in his garage with trash. He was training people with sandbags and used tires, and he was having them push his car. His name's Zach Evanesh, and he was like one of my first inspirations. I saw him online. I saw him. He wasn't on YouTube at the time, but like I found him on a forum. I was like, wow, this guy is training people, and he has no equipment. He's like, you don't have to buy fancy equipment. You don't need a whole bunch of expensive things. He's like, you just need sandbags. You can train people anywhere. And like it was literally like he had a product I think called like junkyard training. I was like, I can go to the junkyard. I could definitely go to the junkyard. And I did. I went to the junkyard and I bought like heavy chains. I bought an anchor. I bought ropes. Like just all this stuff, like, you know, a giant tire. A lot of these things that people take for granted now, they're like, oh, that's CrossFit. I was like, you have no idea, man. This is way before CrossFit. And so I left the gym, or I didn't leave right away. On Saturdays, I started doing a strength camp in the parks. And I would go there and I'd take all the trash out of my truck and I'd have the guys working out. You could even, if you go on my YouTube channel, you know, like 20 years ago, you'll see there's Fox News did a story on me. They came in and they're like, hey, this guy is training people in the parks with trash, and it was like, you know, so like that like helped me, and I was doing some other things to get people to notice me. But this whole idea that I was training people with odd objects in the park was like mind-blowing. It was like brand new. It was like, wow. This was way before boot camps were like a thing. There was a while there where like boot camps became like, you know, popular, but they didn't even exist. I was like a forerunner to boot camps, fitness boot camps, before they exploded, like, you know, more in like the 2010s. And I called it strength camp. And so I did that for a while until I left the gym. I left City Gym. Then I was just training people out of the back of my van in the city parks. And like this was before the city parks even knew what was going on. Like now, like you have to get licenses and shit to do stuff in the park. But back then they were like, I don't know what this guy's doing. It seems like they're not doing anything bad. Like, all right, they just left me alone. So yeah, so I did that for a while, trained people in the parks. I went a couple different parks, and I would have different training groups, and that was my strength camp until I decided that I wanted to bring it all indoors. So there was another guy. So Zach Evanes introduced me to odd object training. Around that time, also, I got into strongman training myself because I wanted to learn more about odd object training, so I joined this guy in my city he was the Florida state chairman for strongman. Once again, like I'm always ahead of my time, not bragging, but this is like before strongman was like popular. Like, you know, you see like the guys on YouTube now, like they're famous and they're cool. This was like before any of that. You know, if you were a strongman, like there was just a bunch of rednecks in the backyard. It was just weird. We were just weird guys lifting stones in this dude's backyard and like carrying farmers carriers up and down the street. So I kind of strength camp and my strongman training started to develop around the same time. And then also I discovered Joe DeFranco, and Joe DeFranco started his own training company out of a warehouse before warehouse gyms were like a thing. So I was like, oh, all I need is like a garage. All I need, especially since I was doing strongman training at Tom Mitchell's house, who was the guy I was just talking about. And it was like out of his garage. I was like, I can do this. So I rented a garage for, I don't know, I think it was like $1,000 a month. I rented a garage. I rolled up the doors. I threw all my stuff in there. And that became my first gym.
Wow. So, and just in retrospect too, like growing up, you were always into football and, you know, a lot of very physical things, and you're still into the very physical things, but how was that transition for you? Like I don't know if you had any like computer experience before. I mean, I know this is like completely new, like at this time. Like, how was that transition for you, like learning how to use computers and, you know, learning the softwares and everything like that?
Well, it's not like it is today, right? Like there's software for everything, click funnels and like, autoresponder services, like, you can do it from your phone. Like back then, I just had to do what I had to do. So I learned, code and just figured stuff out. I hired that one guy and he helped me a lot. He showed me a lot. He gave me some templates, like code templates that I could put into Dreamweaver and develop create my own sites. So, for me, it was like anything else. Like, yo, you got to figure it out. You just do what you got to do. Fake it till you make it.
You were using Dreamweaver, huh? Nice.
That's how I built my first websites. Yeah.
That's what I started on too.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you're doing this physical training, you're kind of like, you don't really have a location locked down yet. You're kind of going to like parks and different areas, like going in your backyard. Um, how did the other aspects of your life look like? Like how is Isabel doing and Colleen?
So, like I said, this was around the time that I then moved out of my parents' house in Florida. Colleen and I moved down there. I may have said that last time. And into a townhouse. And they were busy. Like Colleen's pretty much an extrovert. Like she doesn't sit home and like sulk. Even though, she's busy with babies, she would get out. She joined like moms groups. She was like, parts of like natural mom groups and breastfeeding groups. And she was just doing stuff. She was meeting people. She was doing park play dates. That's what they would do. Like if you have a baby and the other ladies, they meet on a forum. This is before Facebook. On like, I think it was called the Sweet Peas. St. Petersburg Sweet Peas, and it was like this website she found, and like these ladies would get together at the parks and bring their babies, and so she was busy with that. Isabel was an infant, and I was working, all day, every day. So I came home at night and saw them, and it was always nice to come home. Colleen would always have something nice, like she and Isabel would like do artwork, and like Isabel would show me when she comes home. Colleen's always been thankful. So yeah, our relationship was fine. It was good, but I was in hustle mode. I wasn't thinking too much about that. I may have mentioned also that the transition from being a football player. I think I did talk about this. I started fasting. During this time, all this time, I'm like really lean. I'm like small, like 170 something, 180 pounds, which for me is like tiny. I usually walk around most of my life. I've walked around 210, which I am right now. So I was just like super skinny. I wasn't eating very much. I was just busy working. But then when I started strongman, I started drinking protein shakes and eating brown rice, and my big jeans like blew up immediately. So I put on like, I don't know, 40 pounds in like 4 months. And so there was sort of like that kind of transition from like, I was more from like spiritual, Paul Chek, organic to, okay, I'm going to be a meathead again. And so it was like Joe DeFranco, Zach Evanesh, strongman. And so that strongman Elliot, a lot of people who, at this point now, YouTube comes onto the scene pretty soon here. And so if you go back to my YouTube channel, 2007, 2008, this is what people refer to as strongman Elliot. Like their phases, because I've been on YouTube for so long, people have watched me be different people. So if somebody ever says like, I was there when you were strongman Elliot, it means like, oh yeah, I was 240 pounds and like brand new on YouTube and like one of the first guys doing strongman stuff in a warehouse. So
Yeah, it's got to be kind of interesting from your perspective because, I think about this too with like Jordan Peterson and like, people who do podcasting and have just like hundreds or thousands of hours of footage of them online. Like, how has that been for you experiencing that? Because, you've gone through many different transformations and transitions in your life. Like, how has that been for you? Like, does it impact your life at all?
yeah, of course. in every way, shape, and form. Like, I'm well known. It's very rare that I'll go somewhere and someone doesn't notice me. Usually it's a type, it's usually a young man. Now they're getting older, so, usually it's almost always a man. Usually either, and it's funny, they're either, I don't know, it's crazy. Like, I've impacted so many people. So they're either really into fitness and they're like jacked and I can tell right away. I'm like, here he comes, because he's like, strong, or at least lean and fit. I'm like, yeah, he knows who I am. Or they're entrepreneurial, and like I can tell right away. It's like, oh yeah, he's like clean cut, and like I could tell he's savvy and like so entrepreneurial. He's like, and then he'd be like, yeah, I saw your non-job videos, and that's why I started making my own business. Like, so I got inspired a lot of entrepreneurs. Or, believe it or not, like really hippie, like really spiritual, like spiritual hippie type person. And they're like, wow, Elliot, you introduced me to all kinds of spiritual ideas and bioenergetics. So it has absolutely impacted my life in every way, shape, and form. Good, and also, challenging, because when your image is out there, and it's permanently out there, and it's in the consciousness of other people, you don't have a choice, but you become an icon, and you are an idol. And I'm not saying that like bragging. Like, I am an idol. People make me into an idol because they can see me, and then they have their own conception of me, and that lives in them. And that's what an idol is. You take the image of something and believe that that is it. That's why, like, God is like, against false idols, because an idol is like an object. You turn something into a sacred object, and I become a sacred object to a lot of people, and that's scary. That's dangerous, both for people who fall in love with who they think I am, which is also is very tenuous, because the minute you break character or don't live up to their projections, now you don't just go and you don't just fade. You become an enemy. So there are people who they say there's a thin line between love and hate. So there are people that like love me and then they hated me because I'm not the same. I'm not what you thought I was. Sorry, I'm me. I'm a guy. And then there are those who like they see you and they hate you immediately. So for whatever it is, their projection, like, I don't like this guy's face. I don't like the way he talks. This guy is a jerk. They have, all kinds of projections. And so, there's a lot of hate that comes. It's like, you don't even know me. How could you hate me so much? But it's the same thing. You don't really know me. How could you love me so much? So, there's a lot of that. And then that it's hard not to be impacted by that, because the world then is literally your mirror. Like, it is literally my mirror. So I can't get away from my image. And that's hard, because especially as a person like me who's evolving and changing, you might say I have ADHD, but it might also mean that I'm just very expansive. That, like, I hate the trap that evolved by having my image so permanent out there and in so many people's minds, because it's like, no, I don't want to be trapped by that. So there was a lot of resistance. I quit YouTube for a while. I mean, I didn't want to go. We can go down those rabbit holes later, but like, yeah, I've had some tough times as a result of it.
Yeah, man, I was gonna say, like, especially when people are watching you and they look up to you as like a mentor, and then they kind of expect you to be that person in their life because, you help them in some way, shape, or form, and so they're like, maybe transforming themselves, going from one mindset to another mindset, and they're like, okay, this is, I'm watching Elliot. Elliot's doing the thing that I perceive to be right, and now Elliot's doing like a completely different thing, and now I have to like battle that in my ego and with my identity, even though it's Elliot's life,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
So going back, and you just said that YouTube was just coming on the scene. Do you remember like some of the first videos that you made? You said that were recording some of the guys working out and things like that.
Yeah, that's where like, the first year of videos on the channel is just like people working out in the park. Like I'm just holding my camera and the guys are working out and I'm telling them keep going and that's all it is. I wasn't even in the videos. It was me holding the camera.
Yeah, were you like talking to the camera at all? Like just
No,
B-roll
because that
footage
wasn't a
basically?
thing. I didn't I never even thought of that.
Yeah.
It didn't like that never occurred to me. And you gotta like remember also like I wasn't a consumer of YouTube videos. I kind of saw it as like a just a, what do you say, like a server. Like it was just like a video server for me to host my videos that I would send to the emails because now I had email lists and I'd say, hey, you're missing out on these workouts. And then I'd ask my clients to share it with their friends. Hey, send this to your friends. Email it because there was no like text on phones the way we have it now. So it was like, hey, email this to your friends and let them know what we're doing. So I would get more clients, and that was it. Then I filmed some of them as testimonials, and then like slowly over time, I realized like, oh, I can talk to this thing. But that was later on.
So we got YouTube, you're doing the strength camp, this is like the early versions of strength camp, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so how did that kind of evolve over time?
So the strength camp warehouse that I started was in South St. Pete, and it was like in the ghetto. I mean,
What
we
year was this?
literally had, huh?
What year was that?
2008 through 9, 10, 11. Yeah,
By the
2000.
way, like how was St. Pete back in the day? Was it quite different than it is now?
Oh yeah, it was run by bums. It was not what it is right now. And especially down where I was, it was crackheads, prostitutes, I mean, drug addicts. So it was crazy. Yeah, but I whatever, I just did what I had to do.
Yeah, because it's like a pretty amazing place now. There's a lot of really cool buildings and really like novel kind of bars and restaurants and stuff down there. So that's
Oh
really
wow.
interesting.
Yeah, it was nothing. There was nothing. There were no restaurants. Of course there were a couple bars, but these are like dive bars where like, the alcoholics were hanging out. There was no like nightlife. There was nothing. Yeah, it was trash. It was just bummy. It was just it's not what it is now.
And were you there for quite some time to where like you saw the evolution of St. Pete?
I use I have a soft spot in my heart for St. Petersburg for the rest of my life because we literally grew up together. Like I grew up with St. Pete. Like as I was emerging from being a broke bum, right? Like metaphorically, and as I was, raising in my status, so was St. Petersburg. So it was like as I was at my peak, I literally, it's funny because as I was like at my peak, I'd say like 2016, St. Pete was at its peak. Restaurants were awesome, the nightlife was getting great, and it still wasn't overpopulated, and like it started getting very weird. A lot of the rainbow stuff, like they really championed that. Started getting really weird overpopulated, and right at like that when they peaked, I peaked, and then both me and St. Pete started going down. And like I don't say that St. Pete is no good because it is very nice right now, but it wasn't like the heyday when it was like it just started like being nice and it wasn't overpopulated. So right as St. Pete like peaked, I peaked, and we kind of grew up together, and it was a lot of fun. I love St. Pete.
So there was that duration between like 2008, 2016 is kind of the buildup of Elliott Hulse. Let's kind of explore that journey a little bit and just dive into, from 2008 to 2016 and, just see where it takes us.
Yeah. So crash of '08. That's when I started. St. Petersburg was trying to build, but everything came to a screeching halt because the housing market crashed, stock market crashed, This was, I think, Obama's first term, and they did like the whole bank bailout. It was just like, it was a mess. Like high crimes were being exposed. And I started at a very difficult time, and it was still very difficult in St. Pete. And so my warehouse gym was positioned as, dusty old warehouse, and like they say, if you can't fix it, feature it. So I made it like it was a tough guy gym, like, hey, if you go to the gym and you don't get dirty, then your gym is for girls. Right? And if you go to the gym and it's raining and you don't get wet, you go to a sissy gym. So it's like I positioned it as like, if you're a tough guy, then you come train at my gym in South St. Petersburg. And it worked. I learned this. I was learning marketing, like I told you before. So I was from Dan Kennedy. It's like, if you can't fix it, feature it. Like, make the very thing that you think is your downfall, make that your rallying call. So I literally had, no joke, I had guys with Aston Martins and really expensive cars. What did he drive? He was driving like Aston Martins and like Bentleys and shit, like down my crackhead block in South St. Petersburg, Florida. Like, there were a lot of wealthy people. Yeah, there were wealthy women were coming too. I even had there was a time when I had women come in. And so I positioned it that way, and it was paying the bills. It was doing okay. I don't know, maybe I was making $7,000 to $12,000 a month, enough to, pay my bills. And I was like deeply in debt at the time. So a lot of that money went right back to paying off my debts. I was like, we had student loans and we had credit card debt, and I was determined to get out of it. So I took a lot of that money and I just paid off. I paid off our debts. And then the market the housing market crashed, and what I paid $150,000, and I'm paying on this mortgage for this townhouse. And then they do a special assessment, which, that basically means, hey, you got to pay an extra $500 a month because we got to fix some stuff. And I was like, I can't do this. So I defaulted on the loan. I was like, I'm making more money, but I'm not going to put it into this warehouse. To this townhouse. It's ridiculous. So we packed up our stuff and we left the townhouse, and I started renting a house in downtown St. Petersburg, which was a little bit nicer. By this point, I have three daughters, and I think Colleen's probably pregnant already. So I fast forwarded, but we went from Isabel to Emerson to Simone to now like Benjamin is in utero, and we left the townhouse. I just stopped paying. I was like, I'm not paying for this anymore. And we went to rented a house, bigger house, a nice house near downtown St. Petersburg. So around that time, I'm speeding up. We can always go back if you want, but around that time, the warehouse gym in South St. Petersburg, where my house was also, like, it was really getting bad. And these, these really bad drug dealers moved in, and they had dogs that they would just let run loose, vicious dogs. And one of the dogs bit me. It was a pit bull. He came out and he bit me on my hand. And I was like, okay, F this. I can't have clients here. So I used that as my excuse. So I was like, I broke the lease. I was like, I can't invite people here. And it's getting worse. These dogs, this guy's got dogs running around. So that's when both around the same time, I moved my house to downtown St. Pete, and then I moved my gym near downtown St. Pete. So I moved to another gym. Now this was like a commercial space, like in a storefront. This is where my YouTube channel, this is like 2012. This is where my YouTube channel blew up, because I went all in on YouTube at that time. And I was making videos, I got to a point where I started making videos almost every day. So right about when I moved to downtown St. Pete, my YouTube started picking up, and my income went from mostly selling ebooks and e-courses and digital products, which was okay. I did pretty well with some launches. I can go back. I mean, there's a lot that went on in between there, but I launched a few products and met some friends. I mean, there was a lot going on, but Yeah, we did pretty well with a couple launches, but it wasn't like steady income. But I was making more money, so I could I could pay for the nicer house, but I couldn't buy a house because I foreclosed. I basically filed bankruptcy, and then there was a big transition when I realized that I could make money with YouTube, because I was only using YouTube to sell ebooks. But then, as my channel started growing and I was selling more ebooks, um, it was growing moderately. But then somebody reached out to me who was watching me. His name is Keith Hodge, and he and his brother were the Hodge twins, and they were comedians, and they were making fitness videos. And he hit me up one day, and he's like, "You should become a YouTube partner. Why aren't you a YouTube partner?" I was like, "What? What's that?" He's like, "You can make a lot of money." I was like, "I don't know. I'm making good enough money right now selling my products. What am I gonna make, a few pennies per like ad?" I was like, "I don't want to put ads in my videos. It's ugly." And he was like, "Just trust me, just do it." So I was like, "All right, fine." So I turned it on, and like the first month, just from making YouTube videos, I didn't do anything different. It was just the videos I had there. I made like $18,000, and then I was like, "Oh." So I put everything on hold, and I started making videos every day, and it went up to like $30,000. So I created a second channel, and so now I'm pumping out videos every single day on 2 channels. At this point, now we're talking 2013, 14, 15. And with YouTube, now I'm becoming popular. Now people are coming to my gym in downtown St. Pete, like flying there, looking in the window, and I'm like, oh, like, wow. Like, this is kind of shocking to me. Like, what are these people are looking for me? I'm just a dude, and they're coming in, they're like, "It's you." And I'm like, "Yeah, what are you talking about?" Like, I just couldn't, it didn't register like what was happening. I was just making money. I was just making videos and making money. I was like, all right, fine. I didn't even read comments. I'd upload videos and I never looked back. I was so busy producing them. I didn't know who was watching it, what they were saying. All I knew was like the more videos I made, the bigger the check came. So anyway, so that was like the rapid growth that I want to say it was accidental, but it's all divine providence.
Well, let's go back and explore '08 to 12 a little bit more. You said you had made a few products during that time and you had made some friends. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so internet marketing started getting a bit more savvy, and people were doing like product launches, and I got in with some guys that were pretty savvy with internet marketing. So it was not really on my own anymore. This one guy, Mike Westerdahl, he owned a pretty big website called Critical Bench, and he happened to live in St. Petersburg too. He lived in Clearwater nearby. And so he and I became friends, and we started talking about internet marketing stuff. And so we got really good at creating products quickly and launching them with affiliate launches. So that means you would have like other people help you sell your product, and you would give them a commission. And that was like all the rage for around this time. I mean, people were making pretty good money. So we did one launch, and we earned like $30,000 a piece. We put a lot of work in, and it was worth it. But when I earned $30,000 just from making YouTube videos, I kind of like put all that aside.
So what did that look like? You said that, you did a launch and that you were working on it for a while, but like, what did working on it look like? Like typing up stuff and, doing things on the computer and kind of developing this product. And then what did the launch look like?
Yeah, so creating a product is back then is pretty much the same way as you create a product now, right? So had to create the sales page, landing pages, had to create email sequences and squeeze pages, had to create the product itself. So my job was to create the product itself. Mike's job was to create the sales assets. And then reaching out via email or snail mail and just trying to develop relationships with other people who had email lists. Because back then it was all email. Like if you were selling, it was through email. How big's your email list? That's really what it was. And I had a big list from just years of doing it. So Yeah, that was basically it. I mean, it was pretty. It's not much different than it is today, except back then, affiliate launches were more uh, popular and prevalent. People would do like contests, launch contests. Like if you sold the most products, you get like a bonus. So there was a season of that was a lot of fun.
So you were working on this, and like, how long did it take you to develop the product?
From concept to launch, it could take 6 months.
6 months, and then you launch, and then how long does it take to start, really bringing in revenue?
Well, the whole idea of a launch is like to bring in all your revenue in 1 week. So you launch and it's like sale after sale. You just because like it's a short period. That's how it was. So it was like this is open from day one to day four, and you got to buy it during this time to get all the bonuses or the special price. And so that we did pretty well. We did two pretty big launches. I want to say we earned between 60 and $70,000 total from each one. So it was like a nice payday. It was like you did all the work for like a $40,000 payday. Then there was residual that would come in afterwards, but it was always a lot less.
So what was it like, just like, working on something for 6 months, kind of like, I mean, maybe you had a little bit of uncertainty about like whether or not it was going to work, right?
Yeah, but uncertainty never stopped me from doing anything. I didn't even think about
Sure.
uncertainty. It was just like, oh, this is what I'm doing.
Okay.
Excitement, excitement, like to make the money, but like I was certain that it was going to work. It was a proven concept. I wasn't like making it up. It wasn't blind.
Got it. And then, the week comes around, like, how does it feel, or how did it feel? And like, how did you get notified that you were getting sales? Like, how did you even know money was coming in? Like, were you just getting constant notifications on your phone or your computer?
No,
What did
back
that
then
look like?
phones didn't do what they did. This is still like flip phone time. So we would use all these launches typically happen through ClickBank. ClickBank is like an online affiliate product sales platform. And so we just, like launch day, basically just sit at the computer and keep hitting refresh and watching like all the money come in.
What was that like? Like a day of that? How did that
Exciting.
look?
Exciting, yeah. I mean, there were things to do. We'd make more videos, send more emails, handle customer service. So there was a lot to do, but it was definitely exciting. It was a lot of fun.
Was there any like big customer service issues that you faced or challenges in that area?
Not during that time. I've had other issues with other things, but when it came to digital products, it was all really pretty straightforward because it's a digital product. Like, how many problems could you possibly have? And if you have a problem, it's like, you can fix it without much hassle. So we had customer service reps that handled a lot of that, but there were never really big problems. It was just just staying on top of it.
Did you have any other employees at that time?
No, all we had was a customer service rep. That was it.
Was
Handle
it
email, stuff like that.
was the customer service rep on site, or were you hiring overseas?
No, she was. Oh, there was a guy. Who did we use? There was a guy named Alan. I think we used for a while, and I don't know where he lived. I think he lived somewhere in the northeast or northwest of the U.S.
Got it. So he was remote though.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha, gotcha. Cool. Let's go into the second product launch.
So, after the product launches, I pretty much retired from that and went full time on YouTube.
So did you only launch two products, or
I launched a bunch of products, but they were just smaller ones that I did for myself. I mean, I launched just random work. They were just workouts, just more workouts. Advanced 5x5. So the next big launch that I did that was just me at this time because like my YouTube channel was so big and my list was growing so much. So I was like, I don't need to do product launches. I could just make a YouTube video and I'll sell a lot of stuff. So it was a really big launch when I sold an advanced 5x5 workout routine. And we were mailing wristbands, Strength Camp wristbands to anybody who bought it. That was huge. And I didn't have any help at the time, so we have like videos of me and my daughters packing wristbands at my house so I could send them. And so like, you know, I had my like, I don't know, Isabel must have been like 6 and Emerson was like 4, and they were just stuffing envelopes for me. And literally we just sit there and lick and send, lick and send, lick and send. So for several days I'd come home and we would my whole family got together. It was just me and my wife and 2 daughters at the time, just the two that were helping. Simone was still a baby. And that went well. And then I launched a t-shirt, Strength Camp tank tops, just like this, except they were camo. And that's when, I would say that was when like I realized I'm in over my head and I don't know, I need more help, which was a slippery slope itself. But I back then there weren't like reliable t-shirt selling companies. So I hired this guy that I got a recommendation from to help me like he would print, pack and ship t-shirts. It was his business. Well, he dropped the ball completely. It was terrible. Had like all these people, tons of people bought this shirt from me and they didn't get it for like 6 months. And it was all because just a bad business decision. You know, I hired this guy and he couldn't fulfill. It was horrible. I was so mad. But I had to figure it out on my own. I got it all
What
figured out.
was what was like the biggest lesson that you learned from that big mishap?
Well, it only got worse from there for me in terms of business and business partners because I reacted. I was like, this sucks. I was like, I don't want to deal with this ever again. I don't want to. And so I started working with business partners. And that's a whole can of worms itself. So I ran through a couple business partners that all ended badly because, well, as it turns out, like I'm not that very good with business partners. But the reason why I chose to do it was out of reaction. It was like, okay, I don't want to deal with stupidity with vendors and stupidity with just stupidity. I didn't want to deal. I wasn't willing to suffer the downsides to business. I was getting used to things working out well. I was like, well, I need somebody who can do all that shit for me. And it worked, but like personality clashes and anyway, yeah, so the big lesson that I learned was don't be reactive and be very careful about who you choose to work with. And it's not about them being bad. It's about, you know, compatibility with partnerships.
Totally. So what year was the shirt launch? The camel shirt launch?
2014, 2013, 2014.
Oh, so this is kind of going forward quite a bit.
No, I mean 2012 was when I moved into that gym, and 2013, 14 is when the YouTube channel started blowing up. Around the same time I launched Advanced 5 by 5. I mean, a lot happened between 2012 and like 2014. Like those 2 years were just like a lot.
What were some of your favorite product launches that you did?
Well, Advanced 5 by 5, it was the smoothest one, and people loved it. It was great.
What did
Bonus was to get a wristband, and I was able to deliver on that. It was awesome.
yeah, what did you like about the program? Just that it, was efficient and smooth, and was it like really efficient for people at the time to try that training program?
Yeah, I made a really nice, really simple website, not a lot of copy with a buy button. And I had it, the PDF was laid out nicely. I got it professionally laid out. It was a nice product. It was an ebook, PDF. And I don't know, I maybe sold it for 25 bucks. And I don't know how many sales we made. Probably maybe close to 1,000 sales. I don't know. It was a lot. 800, something like that.
And were you, because you're going like straight into like creator mode, and so did you like really enjoy making new products and programs and things like that?
I did, but I was starting to get stretched in too many different directions. So it was like YouTube, it was like writing emails, it was like creating products. So like I said, shortly thereafter, I stopped doing products and I started doing events. So I would have events at my gym. So we did strength camp clinics. I started doing strength camp challenges and we big competitions and I mean, there's so much, dude. I also launched an entrepreneurial program called Non-Jobs. So I launched another channel where I was teaching guys how to do internet marketing because, you know, obviously I was doing it. And I was one, I'm not bragging again. I was like one of the first to like introduce the concept of like, you can be your own digital publisher. You can be an entrepreneur. Like that concept for the generation that I was speaking to, this was like mind blowing. It was like, really? You don't have to have a job? I was telling kids like, you don't have to go to college. You don't have to have a job. You just find out what you're passionate about and sell it online like I do. And so I started teaching that. I was doing workshops on that, doing events on that. We did a couple really big ones. So as overwhelmed as I'm starting to get just trying to relay this idea to you, in retrospect, it was like, man, I was just doing everything. I don't want to say too many things. I was doing a whole lot of stuff. I was like quintessential entrepreneur ADD. Like I was just doing everything.
What did like like an average day to day look like at this time? Like, were you
My
waking up
day was
super
very
early, working 24/7?
So I get up 5 o'clock, go to the gym, train the one group that I still had. A bunch of guys. I train them at 5 o'clock in the morning. Then I drive back to my house and I cook breakfast for my kids. Oh, we were just talking about it the other day. Like my kids have fond memories of me cooking breakfast for them, blasting
What did
country
you make?
music.
Blasting country music?
Yeah,
Thanks, man.
yeah. So, yeah, I fell in love with country music in St. Pete, because when I was driving around in that old van, I had no. It was a tape player. I wasn't buying tapes, and none of the stations worked except one, which was a country music station. And I never listened to country music when I was in New York growing up. I never listened to country music. And one day I'm, driving. I'm like, there's nothing to listen to. So I put on the station, and within 20 minutes, I'm laughing, I'm crying, I'm being nostalgic. I'm like, this country music is emotional. And I fell in love with it, and so my kids, they fell in love with it. They know, like, they could sing word for word like hundreds, literally like over 100 country music songs. They know, like.
What artists were you listening to?
Well, I fell in love with Zach Brown first. He was, he was a brand new artist at the time, and Chicken Fried was his hit song, that song, and then Darius Rucker, this song where he talks about like this won't last forever. So like this won't last for long, and I'm like he's talking about like his kids growing up. My kids are like tiny, and I'm listening to this song, and like I'm starting to cry. I'm like I can relate. But from there, it just turned into all of them, like all of them. I listened to everybody. Alan Jackson, Travis Tritt. I don't even know where to begin. I'm seeing them in my head. George Strait. Then there was like Luke Bryant and Jason Aldean. I mean, the list can just go on and on and on.
Before that, were you listening to like hip hop or like rock, like when you were in New
Well,
York?
growing up, I listened to hip hop. I grew up listening. It wasn't called hip hop. It was rap. I grew up listening to rap. I listened to rap growing up, and then when it turned into hip hop, that was probably when I stopped. I don't know when it turned into hip hop, but at a some point they started calling it hip hop. At that point, I was done with music basically. I was too busy working. Between 2004 and 2011, I didn't listen to music at all. Only music I knew was when the kids would come to my gym. They were high school kids, college kids would come to my gym, and I just let them. Back then we had iPods, so I was just like, "Yo, plug in whatever you got and whatever you want to listen to. I don't care." So then I was introduced to like a lot of new, at the time, new rap and alternative rock, like punk rock. So there was a lot of punk rock they would play at my gym, and like really like ghetto rap music. I didn't even remember the artist or anything at the time, but I used to laugh because like this music is terrible.
So before then, were you listening to like Notorious B.I.G., like Tupac, those guys, or
Yeah, that was high school. That was high school. Yeah, I grew up listening to all kinds of rap. I mean, like my first rap tape was Digital Underground. And you probably don't even know who that is. But like, yeah, 80s, 90s.
then I think you said when you were a kid, you guys had watched a lot of like TV shows. Like, do you remember any of the TV shows that you guys really like to watch?
One show that sticks out more than any was Martin. Martin Lawrence had a TV show back then called Martin, and we were obsessed with watching Martin. We watched every episode, and we had VHS recordings of them. And like when the seasons were out, like during the summer, we would just pop in a Martin tape and we would just watch episode after episode after episode. I mean, I grew up watching a lot of other stuff like Fresh Prince of Bel Air, and then before that, there was like the old shows like Three's Company and Different Strokes and stuff like that. I don't even know what I'm talking about. But these are like old shows from like the 70s and 80s and stuff. So I grew up watching that. But like Martin stands out as like the all-time favorite TV show that we watched in my house.
Do you have any favorite movies?
Yeah, there are a few movies that I like. Again, I don't, even to this day, I'm not much into movies, or I'm not much into pop culture or anything. But there are a few movies that my wife and I watched when we were teenagers. So that when we started dating, we, you do what teenagers do that date, like go to the movies. So we would go to the movies almost every weekend. There are a couple movies that like both of us really loved. Like one that stands out is with Brad Pitt, Legends of the Fall. Legends of the Fall sticks out as a memory. I mean, like Brad Pitt movies back then stuck out because he was so manly. He was like a manly man. There was Fight Club a little bit after that too, and like, but Legends of the Fall, that movie, it was like a tough guy movie, but also a love movie. And my wife and I, like, we watched it a lot.
All right, zooming back forward to blasting country music and making breakfast with your kids. Was there like a routine that you guys, or like a ritual you guys had where you make pancakes or like something like that, or eggs and bacon?
Oh, it was always eggs. It was always eggs, and I mean that was basically it. I just stuffed my kids full of eggs and cod liver oil. So yeah, and they curse me now that they know. I used to give them raw eggs. I make like protein shakes with raw eggs, and I gave my kids raw egg protein shakes when they were babies. And so like, I was obsessed with like health and like their brain. So I'd come home, I'd blast the music in the kitchen, they'd come running downstairs, and I'd pick them up and put them on the counter, and here I am frying up eggs and blending protein shakes for them. They get it in their sippy cups, they take their cod liver oil, and then I would drive my oldest daughter to school. That was my job for the longest time, was driving them to school. So I'd make sure I was home to drive them to school, and then I would go back to the gym, and then I'd film videos.
Did you enjoy taking them to school?
Yeah, they have so many memories of like, once again, blasting country music, singing to the top of their voices, driving to school.
Because you
Yeah.
had been up for a while already, because you got up at like 5, and then they wake
hmm
up a little bit later.
Yeah, so by the time I got home was maybe like 7,
And so you're just
usually.
blasting with energy, and then they wake up to that, and
Yeah, so they're excited to see me.
nice. So then you take them to school, drop them off, and then what, you go back to work?
Yeah, then I go back to the gym. I go to the gym and shoot videos. Or yeah, that's basically what I ended up doing. I just go to the gym, shoot videos, or work out.
Do you have any like hobbies or interests at that time besides like working out and things like that?
No,
Just kind of
just
monk
my
mode,
family
zoned
was
in.
my family, my business, and my body, you know, working. I was so I was meditating. There was a time when I was like meditating regularly. I don't know if that's a hobby, but like I got into meditation, so spending a lot of time meditating. So yeah, I would do that too. I'd go back to the gym. If I wasn't shooting videos and working out, I was meditating.
Hey, yeah, I was gonna ask, like, where were you at, like, spiritually at this phase of your life? And did you have any experiences meditating? Because I know that that's pretty common.
Yeah, so I for when we were still living in South St. Pete, we started taking the kids to a Protestant church that was local. It was just we took it that we took them to the kids thing, and Colleen and I would go and listen to the pastor. We did that for maybe a year, a little bit. Colleen actually ended up working at the nursery there for a little while. We made some friends there, but when I moved to downtown St. Pete and I moved into my new gym, it was too far away. We went like a couple Sundays, but we had just stopped. And so I had no religious involvement with anything between 2012 and like 2019. It was a lot of new age. I was more into new age spirituality and meditation, and ultimately started smoking weed around that time too, towards the end there. And so that was my spirituality. It was like meditating, smoking weed, and holding crystals.
Did you have like any like psychedelic experiences during that phase? Like,
So
things that happen while
when
you're
I started
meditating?
meditating, I was using a technology called Holosync. So it was like I would listen to these binaural beats, and so it helped me just like sit longer and stiller. And I guess you would say the first experience I had with this, and I started this way back when we were still living in the old townhouse, was the amount of calm that came over me after I started using it, where I was always like anxious and having to work. I remember sitting on the couch one day and I just felt like numb. I didn't feel like the urgency to get up and go work. And I was like, oh, I worried for a moment. I was like, what's happening to me? Like something's wrong. I'm relaxed. And then it dawned on me, actually, I had a mentor who shared it with me, just a guy that I met at one of my at a Matt Basak event. And he was like, oh, it's the Holosync, it's working. And I was like, oh, so that's what happens when you meditate with this thing. You're more calm. So that was my experience with that. So I knew it worked. And that's why I kept using it. On and off, I would use it.
So what was that like? Because I'm sure, you'd been kind of in work mode and go mode, for a long time. And then, you play these beats in your ear, you get super calm, and then you're like almost like frightened because
Yeah.
you're so used to working. Like, so what was that like?
That was wild. But then I went back to doing active meditations. So I know I mentioned Osho and active meditations years ago. With this extra time and energy that I had, I started exploring active meditations in bioenergetics. This must be like around 2012, 2013. And so actually, a big part of my spirituality was bioenergetics. So I was going to Dr. Glazier, who was like the last remaining true bioenergetic analyst. And he was a student of Alexander Lowen's. And I can go into that rabbit hole, but that was a big part of my spirituality at the time, was doing active meditation and bioenergetics. So for just the layman's explanation, it's basically breath work. Doing breath work, but it's like targeted breath work and psychoanalysis. So I got into that. Then I did my first grounding camp around 2014, where I invited people to come to my gym and do active meditations and bioenergetics. So a lot. Once again, like, I'm doing everything.
What was that? What were those events like? Like when people would come and you guys would do like a group meditation, like,
It was wild. Shit that no one ever. Once again, I was ahead of my time. So like you see these people doing like these like men's retreats, like, where they're like letting themselves go and they're being vulnerable and they're shouting and they're crying. It's like, I made that up. I did that first. And that's what it was. So they came and it was like, yo, I turn off the lights, crank up the music, and I would take them through a process. And we're like shouting and pounding our chest and jumping. And it was just like exhaust yourself and then lay on the floor silently for 20 minutes.
And did anyone have like a transcendental type of experience doing that?
People say they love, first of all, they loved it. And I knew more than anything that it was an experience. The results, I don't know. Different people had different results. Some good, some bad. Some people were like, they were like, I couldn't sleep for like a week afterwards. I'm like, I don't know. Stirred something up, I guess. Some people were like, wow, I slept silently for the first time in 10 years. I'm like, wow, that's cool. So I like, with stuff like that, it's like, you can't promise. When you're dealing with the soul, you can't make promises. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. I don't know what's inside you. I don't know what you're going to confront. I don't know what you're going to see. But for one thing, for sure, is you're going to have an experience like you've never had before. And that's all. Like that's what I knew I could promise. You never get to do this. You don't get to do this anywhere else. And so it was that grew. I started doing them, and like at my peak, I had like 200 people at one of these. I started
Seriously.
inviting men and women at them, and it almost turned into an orgy at one point. That's when I had to stop inviting women. I was like, okay, guys, this is I'm a married man. I'm not Osho. I'm not trying to create. I'm not trying to create sex cults.
Yeah.
So yeah. So anyway, that's of course this is a very tangled web. But I started doing the grounding camps. We did, I don't know, maybe a dozen of them or so. I was doing 2 or 3 a year. This was alongside also building, doing strength camp, franchising. We were franchising strength camp, and I was doing grounding camps, and it was just all this stuff, bioenergetics. So now that I'm like, in retrospect, I'm like, no wonder why I like cracked up. Like I was just doing everything.
What do you mean cracked up?
I burnt out. I burnt out, and I had to I disappeared from YouTube. That was like my first, like the first time people were like, oh, Elliot's a human. And so like I disappeared from YouTube. I broke up with some business partners, and I don't want to say I was depressed, but I was like, there were some dark things that I wasn't ready to experience. And a lot of it came to the surface rapidly because I was doing so much bioenergetics and active meditation. And right in the middle of my therapy, like I was seeing Dr. Glazier, I don't know, a good 3 years, every other week, and it was like progress, 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 and then he died. And so when he died, a part of me that was unfinished began to fracture. And so I didn't know I didn't know what to do. So I started, and I couldn't do bioenergetics on my own. Bioenergetics is not easy to do by yourself. You need a trained therapist or analyst or facilitator. And so I started smoking weed and doing yoga. And I don't know, I mean, in retrospect, maybe I had a psychotic break or something. I don't know. But that's when I changed, and people were like, what's going on with Elliot?
And then, so just to kind of back up a little bit, you had mentioned Keith Hodge and your experience with the Hodge twins. Let's explore that a little bit because, I mean, one of you guys looked really similar. I thought when I was growing up watching you, like I thought you guys were like the same person. I was like, dude, why is Elliot? He looks a little bit different. And I really like the Hodge twins. They're really cool guys too. What was your experience like with them?
Well, I didn't really have much of an experience with them. It was literally like 2 phone calls. And a part of the reason why he reached out to me is because he wanted to get a commission for recruiting me into being a YouTube partner. So he sought me out and he was like, hey, just do it. And once I signed up, he got a commission. So like it was transactional. So after that, I was like, I didn't hear from them for years.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Well, I mean, would you feel comfortable kind of exploring some of the break that you experienced, and that you had mentioned you had experienced like this fragmentation, and Would you feel comfortable exploring that a little bit?
Yeah, well, it all has to do with like bioenergetics and active meditation. It's like it triggers something in people, and I, just like I am, I go all in. So a couple things started happening. Like number one, I exposed myself by doing bioenergetics on YouTube, and that video went viral. And like I was just shouting and pounding my chest and spitting on the camera. I was just being a beast because I was like, check this out. This is awesome. This is fun. You want to do this, and people like I've that video made me $1 million easily because people are like, I want to do that. But it also led to people taking it out of context. And so there became like, dozens, hundreds of videos of like parodies of me. And so that kind of hurt me because I was like, man, I know I'm stupid for doing that, but that's just the way I am. But now like I got to face the consequence of like people are now making you look like an idiot because you made yourself look like an idiot, but now they're taking it and running with it. So they're, like I mentioned earlier, like when you're riding high and people love you, you're gonna attract just as much people who hate you. And this was like the opportunity to to take me down, like to like chop me down. My ego was inflated. There's no question about it. I was definitely in a state of an inflation, and this is how I got chopped down. And so between that and like people now challenging me about bioenergetics, saying it's pseudoscientific, and now I'm running around scrambling, trying to prove myself, trying to like defend myself. I'm like, I start buying like all these books on like body psychotherapy, and like I'm reading and like now I'm defending. I'm not playing offense anymore. I'm playing defense. I'm trying to defend myself. I'm trying to like protect my reputation, and that's not a good look. But it's what was required because in retrospect, I was like I was inflated and I needed a humbling. But instead of seeing it for what it was, because I couldn't and I had no containment and I no longer had a psychoanalyst and I wasn't religious at the time, I just numbed myself to the pain by smoking weed and doing yoga. So this was my smoke weed and do yoga phase. Well, it turns out that smoking weed, doing yoga, and then still trying to go to the gym is a bad idea, especially when you're high. And so, and making videos is a bad idea. So now my videos are starting to like be stupid. And I began injuring myself. I tore my other bicep because I was going to the gym high and I injured myself. And it was just a spiral downhill with injuries and humiliations and failed projects. So 2016, like I said before, like I peaked at 2016 and then started spiraling down. It wasn't an immediate crash, but it was like a spiral. And throughout that spiral were injuries. I injured my neck, falling on my head, a trampoline accident. I tore this bicep, which never healed fully. I tore my Achilles tendon. I got a hernia. I'm on and off making YouTube videos. I'm at the peak of my popularity, but also at the peak of my disillusionment and disintegration. Like I'm starting to lose it. And I can make all kinds of, retrospective calls on what was happening. But the point was that like it was a clear, people were starting to like call it out, like, yo, did Elliot have a psychotic break? Like, what's going on with this guy? Between drugs and bioenergetics and trying to defend myself, coming from a wounded place, not a place of strength, I was still doing okay. Like this is when grounding camp really blew up. I was inviting people to a healing journey with me while I'm healing myself, which was a theme for many years after that. Was like, so I also got into astrology at the time too. And I don't follow it like I did anymore like I did because I was doing it out of fear and need for control. But one thing that kind of resonated with me, that like I can see what was happening at the time too, which, is astrology true? No. Does it rhyme? Yeah. So Chiron, which is the archetype for the wounded healer, the planet named Chiron is named after him. Chiron was a centaur in Greek mythology he was the master healer teacher of Achilles and all the warriors. So he was highly respected amongst like the young men and the warriors. And he would heal them and he would train them and he'd make them great warriors, but he himself was wounded and he could never heal himself. And so anyway, Chiron goes into Aries right around this time. I'm in Aries. And so like that archetype like eclipsed, like overshadowed my outward persona. And it really colored the 10 years of this spiral downward, which is like, I'm trying to heal everybody, but I can't heal myself. And so that's what Grounding Camp was about. That was what so many other projects. There were some that went really well that was just purely by the grace of God. And there were some that were like just born out of my own woundedness. And as I'm spiraling down and I'm struggling with addiction, I also started fasting. And through fasting, I came into Christianity. By coming into Christianity, I came back to Catholicism. And that brings us, now I'm going 2016 to like 2020, that spiral, but also the grace of it, right? Like, in order to heal myself, I started fasting. I didn't know what else to do. So I started fasting. And in my exploration of fasting and my practice of fasting, which I was familiar with from being a Baha'i, like I told you last time, I discovered Orthodox Christianity. Because I was I was so disillusioned with New Age at this point. Because I was like, this shit is not working. I was like buying crystals and I was doing astrology and I was doing yoga and these crazy meditations. And I'm like, this stuff is just making me worse. And of course, smoking a lot of weed. And I was like, I'm not getting anywhere with this. And, I made nothing life threatening, but I made some stupid decisions, which we can get into or not. But I got to like a rock bottom place where I started fasting. I was looking into Western spirituality. It's like, why? Like, Buddha's not going to help me anymore. Like, this is it. Osho this is not where it's at. Like, I went down this rabbit hole and there needs to be something. Like, where is our Western spirituality? Like, what did Western men do? Like, we have no spirituality in the West, it seemed to me. I was like, all there really is Christianity in its Protestant form, which kind of made me cringe. And there was New Age. And so when I started fasting, I looked into Orthodoxy, which led me back to traditional Christianity, which led me back to Catholicism. So I'll pause there.
And then can you explain what you meant by, like, you said you experienced this fragmentation a little bit earlier on. You said you kind of had this fragmentation of, I'm guessing, like your identity started to kind of fragment.
So around this time, I also discovered Carl Jung. I discovered Robert Moore and Jungian analysis and the archetype of initiation. So I started to understand so as a wounded man, I began to explore my own wounds and I began to see the wounds of the men in the world around me. This is also the time that I became red pill aware. And so this fragmentation can basically be described as the fracturing of the ego self axis. So no longer identifying with the self, which the Jungians call the self, which if looked at from a Christian perspective, my relationship to Christ was fractured. I had no relationship to Jesus Christ because I became my own God. And so that's where the fracturing happens. The fracturing happens when you become your own God, and like every inflation leads to a deflation. And so you believe that you are your own God, right? And that's the idolatry in this day and age. The paganism of today is not idol worship, it's self worship. And so I bought into that. I bought into this self worship. And I had all the reason to do so. Look at me. Look at all I got. Look at all I've done. Look at everybody loves me. And so I bought into that, and that then collapses. And when that collapses, there's an ego fragmentation. In other words, the ego that supported that inflation is no longer viable. It can't help you anymore because it's broken now. And so there is a desolation associated with that, where now you don't know who you are. So I didn't know who I was. I was like, well, am I this or am I that? And so I'm like running around trying on different identities. And that's why people are like, what happened to Elliot? Well, I was in a cocoon. I was in a cocoon. So in learning about, so I learned a lot about mythology. I learned a lot about like Joseph Campbell. I was studying a lot of Joseph Campbell and King Warrior Magician Lover and Iron John. And I learned this term catabasis. And I was literally going into a catabasis. A catabasis is a downward spiral that every man will go into in order to do soul retrieval. So I was going into basically it's a cocoon. And you know, like inside the cocoon, there's no beauty. The butterfly doesn't look beautiful, and the worm, what was it, the caterpillar, is dissolved. It's just a puddle of mush inside there until it reformulates and becomes a butterfly. So I spent many, many years in this cocoon.
I've been through something very similar, and were you kind of questioning like what was right and what was wrong at this time too?
All of it, yeah. I don't know up from down. I don't know left from right. I don't know anything. And you're grasping at straws.
And Jung is a pretty intense person to run into at this time too.
Yeah, it's exactly what I needed. Because prior to that, I was really into Wilhelm Reich and his study of character analysis and body psychology. And his tools were very powerful for transformation. But without the containment that Jungian analysis provides, there was no context for who I was becoming. And even though Dr. Glaser was a great bioenergetic practitioner, his analysis skills were not very strong. And so I discovered in this time through my own, I would say by the grace of God, he pointed me in these directions. I realized what happened. I was using very powerful transformational tools with no containment in order to ground it. And so Jung is very powerful, but Jung is also very grounded. And that's exactly what I needed. That's why I created Grounding Camp.
So even kind of looking at it more from your current perspective, like you're a Catholic and a Christian, do you think that you were experiencing any type of like demonic type of an influence in your life at that time too?
What really pushed me to embrace Christianity was the spiritual warfare. I was absolutely being attacked, but the most potent attacks were coming in the form of the challenges my daughters were having, especially my oldest daughter. She was struggling heavily. She's a very sensitive soul, and she was not doing very well. And I believed the source was demonic attack. Because if they can't get you, and I know I'm protected in a lot of ways spiritually. I don't know why, but God's protected me spiritually. He will attack your family. And so he was attacking my daughter. And long story short, I was onto something. I opened the door to negative forces that came in and impacted my daughter's life. But due to my conversion and the prayer, like my prayer life, at a certain point, like was just feverish, she was delivered. And so it was absolutely 100% Jesus Christ that delivered my daughter. I mean, she was ready to be a nun. She went from being like, I don't want to say she was worshiping Satan, but she was like into all kinds of pagan, weird ritual shit, to like Now she prays the rosary 3 times a day and wears a brown scapular. Like, deeply spiritual, but like so much so that it's like she wanted to be a religious. So yeah, there was definitely a demonic aspect to this.
And like, what did that kind of look like? I mean, in terms of you're suspecting that, okay, there's potentially some demonic activity going on here, and then, what kind of led you to assuming that or thinking that?
Reading the scriptures and looking into it. Being being is that orthodoxy drew me back into traditional Christianity. There was a lot of books I was reading about unseen warfare. The Orthodox, when I was reading like the Desert Fathers, they were always talking about demons. And then I started reading Ignatius of Brianishov, who was an Orthodox saint. He was I don't want to say seminary, but he was like he taught monks, and he talked a lot about Satan and the demons. So I was exposed to it, and I was like, oh, I see what's going on here. And it's pretty evident to me.
Was there anything that happened? Like, did you have any supernatural occurrences that happened?
Yeah, there's things that may be considered supernatural. I mean, like there were some manifestations in my daughter's room. She was seeing things. She had really bad nightmares. She would see figures in the dark. And during a breakdown moment of my conversion where I completely gave in to God and asked him to lead me in this moment, which brought me back to Catholicism, the moment that like descended upon me, that sense that like I'm depraved, I can't fix myself. There was a big electrical surge at my house, and some major appliances went out, and they fried. I had no explanation as to how that happened. I had to get a lot of those things repaired. But to me, that was like a supernatural instance. I was like, what just happened here?
So what, you were just kind of like sitting in your living room? Like, were you like praying? Like,
I
how
was
did that look?
bawling my eyes out in the sauna. I was sitting in the sauna just crying.
So you're bawling your eyes out in the sauna, and then all these things in your house. Is your sauna in your house or is it outside your
Yeah,
house?
the sauna blew.
Sauna blew even.
Yeah,
Seriously?
yeah, the sauna blew. And it broke. I had to, like, it was broken for months. I had to repair it.
That's crazy. And then you went into the house and you noticed, was the fridge you said was also fried?
That was the only appliance that I needed to be repaired, but the switches needed to be flipped. There was a surge.
Interesting. Um, and then a little bit earlier you mentioned, there was these experiences where you hit rock bottom. Do you want to go into that?
Well, 19, I had that conversion experience, and I walked out of the sauna, and God placed on my heart that I need to repent. And that's one of those Christian words that kind of like trigger people, and it triggered me too. I didn't even understand what it meant. I was like, we need to repent. What is that? And it was funny because I was like, well, how do I do that? And he laid it on my heart. The Holy Spirit said, go to confession. I was like, confession? I haven't been in a Catholic church in like 34 years. But I was baptized Catholic, and I had the sacraments. So I was like, I can go. I mean, I'm already initiated, like I can go. So I was like, well, let me figure out how to do this. So I went on YouTube and learned how to do a confession. And I went. Now, mind you, like I know that like addiction has a grip on me big time at this time. And part of my prayer before even going to confession was like, God, I was like, I can't rid myself of this. I'm not strong enough. I can't get rid of this. I thought I could, but I just keep going back to it. It was a process. But anyway, at that point, I was like, I'm not going to quit. And I'm just going to, now I started openly getting high. I was like, I'm not going to hide it anymore. This is it. I'm going to smoke until you take it away from me. And so even when I went to confession for the first time, it was a wild experience. I was high as a kite. I was like, I'm going to go to confession. I had my book. I did a general confession, so I had a long list of sins for like years, decades worth of sins. And I go in, and it's, okay, 12 o'clock, you go for confession, and there's a line. So I'm like, all right. So I sit in the line, the back of the line, and they start praying the rosary. And it was just like this chant. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Santa Maria Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus. And so here I am, like I've never heard this before in my life. And they're chanting the rosary, all the different prayers, and I'm like starting to like catch it. I'm like, okay, but it's like I'm high and I'm having like an out of body experience, like hearing the rosary. I get to the end of the line, it's my turn to go in. And just so happens that it was exactly time for Mass to start. The priest comes out. He's like, confession is over. Come after Mass. I was like, oh. And so I literally walked out the door. I walked out the door. And as I walked out the door, it was like a force literally like pushed me in my chest. And I was like, go back in. I was like, okay. So I went back in. I got back in front of the line. I asked the kid that was there. I was like, can I get back in line? He said, yeah. So I get back in line. And after I sat there after Mass, he comes back to confession. I go in and I do my general confession, and I bawl my eyes out. And I'm crying like a big baby. Woo, woo, woo. The priest doesn't even speak English. He speaks very minimal English, but he knew everything I said, and he felt me. And he was like, you did a good confession. And he had me read the story of the prodigal son. And that was my penance. And from that moment on, I've been Catholic. And so I started going to Mass every day and receiving our Lord in the Holy Eucharist and staying with the sacraments. The time my wife is like, no way. My wife follows me everywhere and will do anything I do. But there was such an anti-Catholic bias in both of our families. And both of our parents baptized us. She's baptized and she has all of her sacraments, and so did I. But both her parents and my parents, and like the generation, basically the boomer generation, they rejected Christianity and they hated the church. So that like sunk into us. And so I never thought of Catholicism at all. And when I told Colleen, I'm going to Mass, she resisted. She was like, anything but that. Why don't you just be Orthodox? Why don't you just be something else? We can't be Catholic. I was like, you already are Catholic. We are Catholic. And that was my venture into Christianity and Catholicism and growing in faith over a series of years.
Do you think it's important, like when you're even at rock bottom where you're living in sin, or you're just having a really tough time, like do you think it's important to not hide yourself from God, like to keep praying to him no matter how far down you go?
Well, that was my experience. I mean, I don't know if anybody told me that was important to do, but I was all in. I was all in and never stopped praying, never stopped asking. The problem was for me, and I think for a lot of people, I think for a lot of Catholics in particular, praying doesn't develop a relationship. And so although it was like, it was willful praying, it was willful obedience, it was slavish obedience. It was like, now I know this is a sin, and I'm determined not to sin, and I'm going to force myself. And it didn't work. It didn't work. And I pray many, many rosaries. I mean, I still have my rosary. I'm playing with it right now. I pray rosaries 3 times a day. I'm doing chaplets out the wazoo, and I'm doing all these like prayers that you're taught, and like I'm doing them. I'm doing them devotedly, disciplined. And it was still a struggle for me, man. And I'm going back. And the thing that I loved about the faith, and I think this is why I was able to stick with it for so long, are the sacraments. So I just kept going to confession. I was like, I'm going to confession. I go to confession. I just go to confession. I just go to confession. And so it's like every other week I'm back at confession because it's like I'm trying, but like my will is not strong enough. That went on for a long time. And I'm happy for the sacraments. I'm happy they were there, and I'm happy that I stayed with it, but I still had a lot of work to do because it was still my will. It was still my will steering the boat. I didn't know what it meant to really give your life to Christ. I was doing religion. I adopted it as like a new identity, a new obsession, a new thing to do. And I was like, well, now I'm doing the righteous thing. And I'm making YouTube videos about it. And like, I'm being very contentious too. I'm like, why Protestants are wrong. And I'm, studying the faith. I'm studying the catechism. And I'm like, I'm not being very charitable about it. And in retrospect, I look at that too. And I'm like, I'm using it as like a battering ram to like use guilt and shame to break open the hearts of men who are suffering like I was. And I had the best intentions because that's what I was doing to myself. I was using the battering ram of the rosary to like beat down my heart, but it was still my own might. It was still my own strength. It was still my own will. And so ultimately I burnt out on Christianity. I burnt out on Catholicism. I didn't stop, but it was transformed into a relationship once there are multiple, it's a spiral. It's a soul spiral. Life is a spiral. There is no like linear path. And so I hit rock bottom, but I had hit rock bottom a number of times. And I hit like a really hard rock bottom about a year ago. And this time it was my business was failing. And it was like no matter what I did, nothing was working because it was all based on my will and it was going against my true soul's calling. And I'm launching products and I'm launching programs and I'm launching communities and I'm trying, everything's failing and I'm going deeper and deeper into debt. I'm like, I'm worse off. I made millions of dollars selling products and courses and YouTube. And now here I am like in debt like I was in the beginning. It was like I lost it all. And I didn't know what else to do. There was nothing I could do. And it wasn't until that point that I really actually gave up what was the problem the whole time. So the addiction, when there's an addiction, the addiction's not the problem. I thought it was. The addiction's not the problem. It's the wound that the addiction is trying to hide, cover. And I knew that logically. I was like, yeah, I heard that before, but I didn't really know it until God showed me how it was my pride of trying to make myself quit and trying to force my business to succeed that was holding me back from Him. And so when I had nothing left, I had nowhere else to go but to give myself completely over to Christ. Because I realized finally that I can't do it. Like I really knew that I couldn't do it. I was exhausted. I was completely exhausted, spent. And so I just sat on my couch. I'm kind of skipping ahead and there's a lot in between here. But you asked about, rock bottom moments. There was that rock bottom moment in the sauna. Drew me out of a lot of my inflation in terms of the grandiosity around self-idolatry in its most obvious sense, which is New Age, into a different kind of an idolatry, which was like Christian idolatry. It was. I don't even say it was Christian idolatry. It was religious identity. It was a religious idolatry. I adopted a religious ego, and it was all self-righteousness. It was all self-righteous. It was this. Satan is so funny because he'll sneak in and use anything to bring you right back to where you're failing. And so he used religion to build my ego back up in a perverted way once again. And so, that was built for a while until I crashed. And, I'm really at the point right now where I'm basically picking up the pieces from that crash a year ago, but completely surrendered to God. I don't even make my own goals anymore. I don't trust myself. Not in a self-deprecating way, but I realize that my will is fallen and weak, and real life is in Christ and an intimate relationship with him. When I used to cringe when people would say, you know, do you make Jesus Christ your Lord and Savior? Right? I'm like, what the heck does that even mean? Right? And like, I would cringe at Protestants too, because they get a lot of the language down, and they get a lot of things right, but they also get a lot of things wrong. And same thing with Catholics. They get a lot of things right, they get a lot of things wrong. But one of the things that I just didn't understand, that I heard come from Protestants' mouths all the time, was, do you make Jesus Christ your Lord and Savior? Now I know what that means. That means I don't live for myself anymore. I am not my own Lord anymore. He saved me, and I follow his will completely. And I don't know if that's another ego trip in itself, but I can tell you what one thing is: humility. Humility is the only logical option at this point, which means, like, remember, you're not made of steel. Remember, you're not omnipotent. Remember, you're a retard and you need God. So shut your mouth and listen to him.
So what do you mean by, like, when you say retard? Like, I know, I think you're using it in like a provocative way, but like, are you just saying, like, God in the Bible, it says, do not rely on your own understanding, rely on God. Is that kind of what you're getting at with, like,
We are all retarded.
I'm insufficient?
Yeah, we are all retarded. It's a part of our fallen nature because we are limited in our understanding. We collapse. So the fall, I think of the fall sometimes in terms of like physics. Like, there are degrees of being: spirit being, soul being, body being. The body is the densest, the third dimension is the densest dimension. It's a fall from dimensions, higher dimensions into this dimension. And what makes this dimension so sensational, but also so confusing and hard, is that we live in a time-space continuum. We don't know the future. We forget the past. We can't do anything of our own accord because we're fallen. We can't see. The whole idea of a sinful nature makes logical sense, because to sin is to miss. And how do you miss? Well, you miss when you didn't see. You miss when you didn't know. And we live in a world where, like, how could you possibly see everything? How could you possibly know everything? But you know who does see everything? You know who does know everything? God. So for all intents and purposes, I'm retarded. I'm perverted also. When I say perverted, I don't mean like, a pervert. I mean, we're perverted by the world. Like, what you think you know about you only comes from the world around you. Your identity isn't in what the school told you, what the music told you, what the media told you, what your parents told you. That's not your reality. That's not your identity. That's your reality. It's not your identity. Your identity is in Christ. Your identity is above and beyond this third dimension, the fallen world. So to think anything other than I am a retard is hubris.
And then when you're saying perversion, like you just mentioned, like having your identity in Christ, like when you say perversion, because some people might take that the wrong way, like exactly like you said, like I'm a pervert or something like that. But what you mean is, like, our natural true identity is in Christ, but like Satan will try to take that and twist it and pervert it. And, like he kind of did in your life, like he made that oriented around you instead of Christ. Is that kind of what you mean by perversion?
That is an example of perversion, yeah. We're battling the constant. So here's another way to describe it. Yuri Rezbinov, I forget how you say his name, but the KGB defector that basically spilled the beans on the ideological subversion that we have been under in the West for at least the past 100 years, was a psyop. We're all living under a psyop. The school was a psyop. Our political system's a psyop. The monetary system, our economy is a total psyop. Hollywood is a psyop, a psychological operation. We've been psychologically operated on. We don't know anything. Like all the things that are coming out, like I've been a conspiracy theory for a long time, But it's funny how like all the conspiracy theories that are now becoming like, oh, facts, people just ate hook, line, and sinker for decades because of the perverted minds that we have under this ideological subversion. Think about the medical industry. Like I told you, I broke my oldest daughter is 20 years old and she hasn't received a single vaccine. People are just now, I just saw an article just yesterday said 60% of new mothers are now questioning vaccines for their children. This is 20 years later. 20 years of perverted mindset for most people in terms of vaccines. Now people are like, wait a second. This is not right. There's something wrong here. So there's not a single one of us. And that's why when Paul says, every single one of us sins. I don't think when he says there's the moral breach portion of sin, yes. But why do you make those moral breaches? Because your identity has been perverted. Who you believe you are and your values have been perverted. What you think you know is we don't know. So there's a battle, yes, against Satan. You're right, but it's not Satan. It is him, but it's him working in the world. Satan working in the world through everything you see, and our own fallen nature. The fact that we fall into the third dimension and we're ignorant.
So speaking of fallen, I mean, earlier you had mentioned that you had fallen off of a trampoline and you like hurt your neck. What happened there?
Was on vacation with my kids and they had one of those trampoline things where like they pull you up while you jump. Well, I decided to jump and do a flip, but the girl let me down too soon and I fell on my head. And to this day, I still have some problems, but that sent me down a spiral as well, because when your neck hurts, it's hard to express yourself fully. So it's probably part of the reason why I wasn't making any YouTube videos for a while.
Then you mentioned you had a couple other injuries. You tore your bicep?
Tore my bicep. Tore both of my biceps. Tore one
What are you doing?
bicep around
Curling?
2010. So around 2010, when I was just getting into strongman, a long time ago, I started using Trenbolone steroids, and it made my muscles stronger than my tendons. So they're right. Yeah, it's a bad idea. So I popped my bicep, but then I went off of it. Didn't really use it again. Didn't use it again at all until I did TRT for like a year, 3 years ago. And then came off of that also. But then I tore my bicep when I wasn't on anything. I told you I was smoking weed, and I went to the gym and I was doing skin the cats with the gymnastic rings. Yeah, I just popped my bicep. That was that.
I mean, how did that feel? Because like when you tear a muscle, there's like that instant kind of reaction that your muscle has, and it kind of like there's like this jolt. Like, did you feel that when you tore it?
Yeah, there's no pain. It's just an awkward feeling, like, oh man. And I knew what it was immediately. I was like, tore my bicep. So I just got in my car, went home, booked an appointment.
Really? Wow.
Yep, and then like 4 months later, no, I don't want to say 4 months, 6, 8 months later, I tore my Achilles tendon at a grounding camp. So like injuries was a big part of sending me down the catabasis spiral.
When you tore your Achilles, what happened there? Like, what were you doing?
I was at a grounding camp just jumping around. You know what I told you we were doing, right? Jumping around, shouting. I was jumping around, shouting, and came down, I guess, the wrong way, and boom, I fell to the ground, tore my Achilles.
So were you like presenting in front of a lot of people?
Yep. It was in the dark, so no one saw it happen. But when the lights turned on, I just kept the show going, and I was just standing on one leg.
Wow.
Yeah, I
That's
did the whole thing. It happened like in the first 5 minutes of the event, and I stayed and did the whole entire event on one leg.
that's a Kobe Bryant move right there. You remember when he tore his Achilles and he shot the free throw afterwards?
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I didn't think of it that way, but that's what I did.
Huh. Well, I think that there's a ton more that I think that we could explore, but we're at like an hour 53, and we're kind of at like a somewhat of a conclusion, but it's just been fascinating, listening to your story. Do you feel like you've really found like a core identity? Because you had mentioned, okay, you're going through this really dark time, you're hitting rock bottom, and you're experiencing this fragmentation of your identity. Do you feel like you really found like a core identity once you started clinging on to Catholicism and Christianity and Jesus?
No. That was a false identity. My first run at it was a false identity. The identity that is growing now, I pray that by God's grace, it is truly identity in Him, because I defer to Him in all things now. And so, but that's a new thing. That's like less than a year old. And I'm not done. I haven't made it out the tunnel yet. I'm at the tail end of the tunnel. I know this based on spiral patterns that I've studied. And so there are these seasons. And my entire age 36 to 49, I see it in retrospect now, because I'm 3 years out of hitting the top of the clock again, which sends me into another spiral, 12 years, every 12 years, based on this model of understanding. And so like I can look back now and I'm like, oh, everything was on time. 12 o'clock, of course, that's when I started cracking up. 3 o'clock, that's when I discovered initiation. 6 o'clock, that's when I moved to the ranch and started healing my heart and my family and came back to Christianity. 9 o'clock, which I just passed last year, was getting my business back online. So, and then that's like the final piece. I think, all right, I got my faith, I got my family, I got my body. The last piece is the business. And so when my business began to collapse, I realized that like, okay, now my business needs to be healed too. My body went through the healing, my family went through the healing, my faith went through the healing. And the faith healing really began the piecing back together of my business in a way that is not ego identity, but identified in truth. And so I'm literally rebuilding right now. And it looks very different than anything I've ever done, but it feels like home. And so I'm doing a lot of soul guidance, one-on-one, but I have no ego in it, meaning I don't have any frameworks. I don't have any, I don't make any promises or guarantees. I am a sojourner. I am a man that's walked the path. And just by listening to this, you know I've been down many paths. And I can look back and I can see men and where they are on their path. And all I can do is be a guide, a mirror to say, hey, look, fella, I know where you are. I know what you're going through. I've been there before. And this is what I learned. And this is what I think I see for you. If I can offer you a word or a mirror or some guidance along the way, that's what God has put me here for. And so I moved from, strongman to strength coach to, all the crazy things I did. And I don't know if this is it, but I'm getting close to the end. And I know that God's called me to be a guide, to be a leader, but in this way, which is very different than anything I've ever seen or done before.
You mentioned that it feels like home. What do you mean by home?
There's no performance. I don't perform anymore. I don't make guarantees anymore. I don't try to impress anybody anymore. I don't try to make people happy anymore. There's no masks anymore. There's no performance, there's only presence. That's what I offer, my presence. If you can sense that my presence will be of value to you, that's what you get when you work with me. No performance, no pressure. I don't pressure myself for anybody or anything. I don't need to. Not because I don't need the money. That's not it. It's because I know that I don't find clients, they find me. They don't even find me, God puts us together. And so if it's to be, it's up to it's up to him. And so I'm not making sales letters anymore. I don't do marketing like I did before. I don't do any of it. I just make myself available to those that God has called to me.
So what does like a day-to-day look like for you now?
Well, it's pretty routine. I wake up and that very couch that I sat on when I hit rock bottom a year ago and I didn't know what to do, well, it's become my best friend. So I get up in the morning, I sit on that couch and I stare out the window. And I begin my days with about 3 hours of prayer. I'll do some spiritual reading. I'll just do some vocal prayer, discursive. I'll do some contemplative prayer, quiet. and then I walk my dogs. So my morning looks like every day. After I walk my dogs, I'll usually shoot videos. I'll make a YouTube video or I'll work on a project. By noon, I'm training. I train myself and my son. We work out together. After that, I see clients. Usually around 4 o'clock, I'll see clients 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. By 7 o'clock, I'm walking my dogs again. By 8 o'clock, I'm showering. By 9 o'clock, I'm in bed. That's my day.
So, I mean, it sounds like a pretty simple routine, but like, do you find a lot of meaning in those things that you do every single day?
I'm not looking for meaning. I don't find meaning in it. I find stability and peace in it. It's peace. It's peace that I'm after. It's peace that's unfolding in my life and in my heart now. Ease, flow, rhythm, peace.
I think that's a pretty good spot to end. It's kind of the transformation of Elliot. You know, growing up, you were, very focused on physicality and, kind of had a chaotic sense of a being, and now you've kind of transformed over time, and God's kind of molded you into someone who is seeking peace and stability.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool, man. Well, if you want to stay on for like 30 seconds, we'll kind of like wrap up. Uh, Thank you so much for coming on, man. Really
My
appreciate
pleasure.
you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It was nice reflecting.
Cool. And yeah, if you enjoyed the show, make sure to hit like or hit the share button, share it with your friends, and yeah, we'll see you on the next episode.